As I'm sure many of you have heard, Speaker of the House John Boehner, not just as Speaker, but as a Congressman, I see a strategic move here. You know, he says the usual stuff, I want to spend more time with my family and all that. And frankly, I don't buy it. The timing of it is suspect. Right before another one of these fake government shutdowns, where very few federal employees are sent home, and everything basically just goes along as usual. I wish that they had the courage to actually shut the government down, or even follow through on one of these fake government shutdowns. That would be true courage, and truly attempting to stick to principles in order to avoid something that is bad for the American nation. The whole purpose behind his retirement, this announcement of his retirement now, is to avoid a bruising fight for the speakership. He doesn't want this debate in the public eye. He wants this to happen as quietly as possible, which is why he stepped down. He doesn't want debate that will be in the public eye, that will communicate the true conservative cause to the American people. He's doing this to protect the establishment Republican Party rather than the Tea Party. He's doing this to protect the wing of the Republican Party that has drifted so far to the left that they aren't even distinguishable from Democrats. If you look at John Boehner, he criticizes those that are fighting to the Republican Party back to a true second party that is distinguishable from the Democratic Party. And that is what we need. I believe it was in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, where John Boehner called Ted Cruz a jackass. Boehner and his lapdog Devin Nunes and so many others in the sellout wing of the Republican Party say that this isn't possible. Shutting down the government to defund Obamacare isn't possible. And it may not be, but since when do you only fight for what's right when you know you can win? If people only fought for what was right when they knew they could win, no one would ever fight for what is right. There is never a guarantee that you'll win when you're fighting for principle. In fact, the odds are normally stacked against a person that fights for what is right. Our founding fathers were fighting for what was right. We were part of the British Empire. We paid taxes to the Crown of England, yet we didn't have representation in Parliament. That was not right. And that's what set off that revolutionary movement in the 18th century. There was no guarantee that they would win that fight, but they thought that was a principled thing to do. That Boehner has that attitude, and that so many Americans have that attitude, it shows how soft and unprincipled we have become in this country. Boehner said on Face the Nation this morning that our founders set up a system of government where things happen slowly, and that the pressure on the Republican Party has been to do things more quickly. And he used a football analogy. I always hate sports analogies in politics. Boehner said that things happen slowly in American politics, in our system of government, and that people are impatient with things happening so slowly, but that's our system. And it is our system. He's not incorrect in saying that. It is not supposed to be easy to pass a law in our system of government. It's designed that way. And so we don't have a bunch of laws that are hamstringing our every move, that are interfering with our lives. It is not supposed to be easy to pass a law in the American system of government. Obamacare, that was basically passed in secrecy. No one knew what was in it. The Democrats said, oh, well, we can find out what's in it when we pass it. It was announced as a dead bill weekend, and then they pass it late at night on a Saturday, and Monday morning, oh, we passed that law. That is not the way it's supposed to work in America. That was shoved down our throats. It was done in secrecy. It was just lies and smoke and mirrors from the beginning. Democracy is supposed to function in the light of day, not late night secrecy. And that is how this Obamacare law passed. And I've done videos on this. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about Obamacare. Watch what I've said about Obamacare. Just check out my other videos. It is a bad law. And it has cost jobs. It has cost medical device manufacturers profit. That is the kind of aggressive action that the left takes that undermines our freedoms. The left is not shy about doing things aggressively. And they take more and more freedom year after year after year through their aggressive action. They are so well organized that they're able to do that. So when we're talking about unconstitutional government, and government that does unconstitutional things, and government that doesn't respect the will of those that elect them, and so many laws on the books do not belong on the books, that we need to aggressively undo that. We need to move quickly to undo that. It is a miscarriage of justice that these laws were passed in the first place, where things did not happen slowly enough. That's where the normal functioning of government was ignored. It just cynically used the will of the American people, and in a way that is not constitutional. That does need to be undone, and it needs to be undone quickly, and it is right that people are impatient about that. And it is right that people were pushing Boehner to do something about that. In fact, he was elected on a promise, and this Republican majority that we have in the Congress now were elected on a promise to stand up to Obama, and they are not doing it. The Republican rank and file did not have a chance, and the Republican rank and file did not take advantage of the chance. They had to get rid of Boehner and McConnell, whose leadership is a big problem. It's been spineless. It's not even true leadership. It's been spineless. It's been cowardly, being a lapdog for Obama. They have not stood up to Obama. They have a constitutional authority as a legislature that is a separate but equal branch of government. And they are not using that to the advantage of the American people here. And they've squandered a huge opportunity. And it's no wonder people are cynical and distrustful of Boehner. Now, I said Boehner stepped down to avoid a bruising fight, a public fight that would have a chance at getting the message out there about how corrupt they are. And he's hoping this will happen quietly. That disappointed me in a way when it first happened, but there's also a real opportunity here, if people take advantage of it, to still have that fight. And there's even a bit of an added advantage if it's worked right, because the rank and file Republicans no longer have to be concerned about crossing a sitting Speaker of the House. They were in a little bit of a pickle, some of these members, that their constituents back in their district were upset that they didn't oust Boehner. So, on the one hand, they would have to cross a sitting Speaker, but you can't cross your constituents at home, or you could be facing a challenge in the primary in your own district. That is no longer as much of a concern. But I think even at that, these people in the districts where they were concerned more about the Speaker of the House than their constituents is just wrong. I've said this in prior videos, that they are not there to represent the Speaker of the House. They are there to represent their constituents. If they're putting their loyalty with the Speaker of the House over their constituents, that is wrong. And there are a few representatives who have voted the way their constituents want, even though it upset Boehner. And I've talked about this here. I think Cynthia Lummis is one, and there are three others. I do forget their names off the top of my head. But you can do an internet search for this of people that did stand up to Boehner because their constituents wanted them to. See, that is real courage of convictions, because that is what they are there for, is to represent their constituents, not to represent John Boehner. John Boehner didn't vote for him. John Boehner didn't elect them. John Boehner did not send them to Washington to establish the Republican Party as a true conservative party again. And it's not going to happen with people like John Boehner as Speaker of the House. You don't fight for something only when you know you can win. These things that people are fighting for, like trying to undo a law as destructive as Obamacare, that needs to be fought for. That needs to be constantly fought for. It needs to be fought for so that even if you aren't winning, you're keeping the debate alive. You're keeping it in the news. You're keeping it as a public. You're keeping it alive as a public debate that will keep it in the public's mind. It will educate people about the destructive nature of this law or any other destructive law that oversteps the government's constitutional bounds. We need to return to a constitutional government, and John Boehner does not have the courage to be the man or a woman that is really, really principled enough to do what's right regardless of the consequences. That we're in this boat in the first place is because we have people that would rather do what is convenient and expedient rather than people willing to do what is right. And it's infected our nation from the top down. And even among our communities and our families and our workplaces, there are too many people that do the expedient thing as opposed to the right thing. John Boehner is one of the most powerful people in the nation, and he set a horrible example because he's been doing what's expedient rather than what is right. You know, in this Face the Nation interview today, he said that we must do what is right and what is possible rather than doing what is impossible. He said it's easy to say you have the courage to do the impossible thing, but the really courageous thing to do is to do what's right and possible. I disagree with that. That is just fundamentally a wrong thing to say and a wrong way to think. If you're only doing what is possible, you're already compromising with the left, and our freedoms are being limited more and more year after year because of this constant compromise with the left. And even Ronald Reagan fell into that trap at times. That's something 20 years before he was president he warned about, compromising with the left because they incrementally get their goals. But when he was in the presidency, Ronald Reagan actually did that a couple times. He forgot his own advice. One big thing he compromised on was immigration. And we're paying for that to this day. And that's one of the few big mistakes I think Ronald Reagan made. You only do what is possible, you're limiting yourself. Sometimes more is possible than you realized if you're willing to fight for it. And if the Republicans had stood together to fight against the Affordable Care Act, so-called, if the Republicans had stood together and fought against that, that would have been the principled thing to do. Instead, John Boehner's the type that wants to water the fight down. He's the type that a consideration of what can be done and what he thinks is possible is being a politician. It's a political calculation. It is not a matter of principle at that point. We've had enough of people that are these political calculators. And that's what the Clintons are. That's what Obama is. That's what John Boehner and Mitch McConnell are. And we're tired of it. The three people that are leading the race for the Republican nomination right now are not even politicians. People do get tired of being lied to. And we are so tired of being lied to. Oh yes, you have Donald Trump, you have Carly Fiorina, and you have Dr. Ben Carson. Those are the three frontrunners, and none of them are politicians. Congress really does corrupt people. Look at it, the longer you're there, the more likely you are to be corrupted, and the more deeply you are corrupted. The longer a person's there, the more likely they are to be corrupted, and the more deeply they become corrupted year after year after year of being in Washington. I've had discussions with people that aren't even in government, but serve on profits, some of these non-governmental organizations in Washington, D.C. They're with that inside the beltway mentality, and it even corrupts them, even though they aren't in government. I did a video on a Martha Burke and about how I emailed her about something, and she has that inside the beltway mentality, and she's not even in government. People are corrupted by that environment. It's very hard to resist, and I think people really do lose their center. My congressman, Devin Nunes, has really lost his center in that environment. His family's successful in business, and he's not one of those people that's gone into that dirt poor, like many have, and it's not right, but you can kind of consider where someone that's comes from a family that has no means, where they might sell out for favors, and that if you look it up, there are people who become very wealthy in Congress that literally no money when they went into it. Well, not right that someone would sell out because of that. I understand where someone that's faces the dire circumstances that come along with poverty that might happen. But someone that comes from a family with a successful business where they don't have to worry about being out on the streets is really, really is ethically weak. And I never thought Devin Nunes would be that type of person. And I mean, I've seen politicians corrupted, but this guy has been pretty solid until recently. And I believe he's just corrupted at this point. So, John Boehner, this thing where he says that we need to move slowly. Well, no, not when our freedom is at stake. Not when our very future is at stake. The left moves aggressively and quickly. And you look at FDR, where he put all this stuff, all this legislation under FDR that was unconstitutional, and he packed the Supreme Court, and he rapidly changed our nation in his administration. FDR, I believe, to this day I believe, that FDR did not serve our nation well. I'm almost nostalgic for someone like FDR, because I do believe he did love this nation. He was incredibly misguided and naive about the nature of socialism, and how it just creeps more and more into the fabric of society, into every nook and cranny of our lives. But I don't believe FDR hated our nation. I believe Wilson came pretty close to it. I believe Jimmy Carter came even closer. And I believe Barack Obama really does hate America and everything it stands for. Like that in the White House. Fight back with everything you have. You need to do what you can. Obama is not shy about pushing his stuff through. Obama is not shy about the dramatic changes he's making in America. Obama is a very practical person. And this is really a street fight. We don't have a street fighter, Senate leader, or House leader. Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. And that's a problem. We need someone really willing to fight. Like Obama, he really is a ruthless person. Look at how he basically just dismantled the Clinton political machine. And the Clinton political machine was a formidable one. But he had no trouble just tearing that to shreds. People like John Boehner saying we need to move slowly, that's our system, that is not designed to move quickly. Well, that's saying that the restoration of American principles, of constitutional government, of the freedoms of us as individuals is not important to him. He's not even willing to fight it because it's got to move slowly. The left never moves slowly when it's taking our freedom away. The Republicans are saying, well, we need to move slowly to reestablish it. There is no way to slowly reestablish freedom. It just needs to be done. We need to have that mentality that, we've had enough of this. We don't want to move slowly. We want our freedom back. He's saying we need to move slowly, and that's not good enough for some in the Republican Party. Well, the people in the Republican Party that say that's not good enough, it's because they actually want to reestablish American freedoms. They want to keep government out of our lives. This is not a nation where government is supposed to be interfering in the pursuit of our goals and our dreams. That's something that we are supposed to be free to do. When it comes down to our freedoms being limited and our prosperity being undermined, we are dealing with a situation in America where government has radically overstepped its bounds. I don't want us to slowly reestablish those principles. I don't want to slowly rein in government, and that probably won't even work. This is something that we need people that are aggressive, that are willing to fight, and are willing to move quickly. The whole problem is that we have all kinds of laws where the government is interfering in stuff that it has no constitutional authority to be doing. We can't spend a generation undoing that. That's something that needs to be rapid. We need to wake up as the American people that it is that serious. The best solution is to quit electing idiots that appoint activist judges to the Supreme Court. That's why I've always hated this attitude that if we elect a president, we can just vote him out in 4 years. Yes, we can, but the chances are that he's going to appoint someone to the Supreme Court, and that means we've lost the Supreme Court for another generation. And we're going to get more screwy activist opinions from the Supreme Court, like gay marriage, like Roe v. Wade. Those were both activist decisions. That should not have even been heard by the Supreme Court. The Constitution does not speak to that. There are certain powers that the federal government has that they are not supposed to step beyond. Obamacare ruling was also an example of judicial activism. A part of the law, if a law is unconstitutional, it should be struck down in whole. Did they just strike down parts of it or this, that, but they rewrite it after the fact, and it just turns into a big mess. That is not what the Supreme Court's there for. It's supposed to decide whether a law is constitutional or whether it is not. And it was a tax, it isn't a tax, it's this or that, and I mean, it's just so much nonsense. This situation with Boehner, though, that things in our government are supposed to happen slowly, except the left has aggressively shoved laws down our throat, and quickly shove laws down our throat. And we need to be aggressive about undoing that quickly if we're to have any hope. And like I said, we need to learn as American people not to elect leftist presidents that have this authoritarian attitude that it's just top-down governance, that they won't listen to what the American people want because they, in all their wisdom inside the government, know so much better than we do. Well, no, they don't. They're corrupted by that environment in Washington. They're corrupted by greed for power. And people should never forget that. Their whole motivation is greed. Tax code to influence behavior. They're turning the government into an instrument of social engineering, and that is not what government's for. The federal government in America is supposed to do very little. It's supposed to do very, very little. And one thing it's supposed to do is maintain a stable currency. Well, they've done a horrible job at that. One thing the government is supposed to do is maintain a military. Well, they've done a horrible job at that. They basically turned the military into a big social program and a petri dish for social engineering. Not what the military is for. The military is a fighting force. It's a serious business. People's lives are on the line. The nation is on the line. When you start undermining the military, at it as a social program or some kind of social experiment rather than a fighting force, that is a dangerous thing to be doing. And it's the left that wants to do that with the military. The military has a very, very narrow mission. And when you start getting into these other areas, you undermine that narrow mission, that very vital mission. So like I said, I don't know what the solution is. We need to educate ourselves as Americans. We've got to stop electing power-hungry, greedy people. And we do have to start electing people that actually believe this is a valuable nation in history and an exceptional nation in history. And this idea of inalienable rights, that does make us an exceptional nation. That is something new in history. Even Britain, and I like Britain in the UK, and I mean they've gone very much astray too. But I do believe on the whole, Great Britain has been a force for good in history. And I do not believe that the British Empire was an evil thing. Britain does not guarantee for its citizens inalienable rights. They don't have a constitution that says, all right, people have the right to free speech there. They do not have a strict right to property there like we do here. They don't have the right to bear arms there. Now, yes, people in Britain own guns, and people in Britain do speak out, but they are not inalienable rights. The way the system is set up in England is actually closer to a privilege than a right. America is a unique nation in history. And yes, we're human, and yes, we make mistakes. All humans do. But we still have been a force for good in this world. If our nation does collapse, the world will enter a second dark age. Without an America would not be a friendly place to be alive. It would be dark, it would be daunting. Evil would be running amok to an even greater extent than it is now. Evil is running amok to the extent it is because we do not have solid leadership in Washington, D.C. We do not have it in the House of Representatives. We do not have it in the Senate. And we surely do not have solid leadership in the White House these past several years. And there are people all over the world, and you can see this, that recognize that we do not have solid leadership. And they're taking huge, huge advantage of that fact.